Welcome into episode 161 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
Software updates of all sorts, diving into an Adware issue, and tales of another not-so-smart thing. What do Apple, Adware, and the Pope have in common? They're all on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. All sorts of updates to tell you about this week. Apple on Monday released iOS 13.2. Moving in lockstep was iPadOS 13.2. Two totally different things, supposedly. TechCrunch wrote up changes for the two operating systems. For iPhone 11 specifically, there were changes to the camera app, including adding support for better pictures through an image processing feature that should make your photos look better thanks to machine learning-enabled processing. That's a thing called Deep Fusion. The update also gave phones in the iPhone 11 line the ability to change video settings in the camera app rather than having to go through settings. Also added over 70 new emoji, according to Apple Insider, and a bunch of other stuff. Let's just get to the security stuff, because that's really why we're here. There was actually security stuff built into the operating system. Probably people remember the Siri scandal from earlier this year. That was the one where a third-party contractor blew the whistle on secret stuff that he heard people say when they were talking to Siri. Except a lot of times those people weren't intentionally talking to Siri. It was getting tripped accidentally. So he was hearing people having sex, people making drug deals, all sorts of stuff that people might not want to have other people hear, and certainly stuff that people wouldn't want to have recorded. Well, you can stop that from happening now because of something that they built into iOS 13.2, August.
Yeah, TechCrunch reported on this, and they say with iOS 13.2, you can opt out of sharing Siri recordings with Apple employees, which is always a good thing. And you can delete your Siri and dictation history. If you want to do this, just go to Settings, tap Privacy, then tap Analytics and Improvements, and you can opt out at any time. And as an aside, you can also choose this option when you install the OS.
Now, remind me why Apple would do this in the first place. I mean, the recording thing.
Well, Apple's grading system allows them to improve Siri. It sends what are essentially errors back to Apple for them to examine. For example, if Siri doesn't understand you or doesn't understand a question, Apple can look at this question and hopefully improve Siri's performance.
The funny thing is, one of the things that they were actually grading it for were people intending to turn on Siri, which is kind of amusing because, I mean, I guess that's the kind of thing you do want to grade on, right? And yet, if the answer is no, then you can't really get people to ignore what they heard until, well, they've heard it. Now, I know that you like to leave analytics on for app developers. And in this case, Apple is the app developer. They're, developing Siri. And apparently random sampling of things that people say to Siri, goes into piling those analytics. I guess what I'm wondering is, now that you have the option to turn this off, are you going to leave it on, or are you going to turn it off?
In general, I leave these things turned on. It could be that I'm rooting for the home team. But I feel like the information is being put to good use instead of for, say, marketing. So I'm happy to help Apple improve Siri. I use Siri a lot, and I want it to be better. So yeah, I leave it turned on.
It's worth noting, too, that Apple has said a lot about what they're doing to anonymize, how they're not going to be keeping it for, ever. I think they've actually said that they can't trace it back to you specifically, or somebody else can't trace it back to you specifically, although when you and I talked about this earlier this summer, if for some reason what Siri accidentally picked you up saying was, I'm Augustrometer, I live at XYZ234, and I'm doing a whole pile of blow. Well, obviously, then they'll know who did the illegal thing and exactly what they did and where they might find him. Although, again, one of the things they said earlier this year was what the third-party contractor was supposed to do at that point was say that was an accidental activation of Siri and move on. They weren't even alerting people to illegal things that they heard or things like that. There was nothing built in for that.
Right, and it sounds like also you have access to my Siri recordings.
Oh, that's cute. No, it's not your Siri. That's your Nest, I think, that I have access to. I'm not sure. Now, I remember that you were also excited about another thing that was built into iOS that I think we expected initially, and then we thought maybe it'll come into iOS 13.1. But here it finally is, or here they finally are in iOS 13.2. HomeKit Secure Video and HomeKit enabled routers. There's support for both of those in the update that came out this week. Can you remind people what those are and why you were excited?
Sure. The secure video lets users store and view encrypted video from HomeKit security cameras. So it's encrypted. No one else can see it other than you. And then on top of that, it also allows folks to detect people, animals, and vehicles in the video footage that they capture. The HomeKit routers are a huge security boost for your home in that users can control which HomeKit devices can communicate over the internet, which is always really important.
No, we just need to wait for the HomeKit routers to come out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't mean to say that in a snarky way, but this is not a thing that, like, if you're rocking whatever router, came from your cable company or something like that, I mean, what you have right now won't do this, or probably won't do this. We have to wait for that hardware to come out and then, decide that maybe the free router that came, with our service isn't, well, first of all, not free, but also not necessarily as strong as we want it to be. Now, for people using older iOS devices, iPhones as far back as iPhone 5 and iPads that would, quake in the fake of iPad OS, Apple has released iOS 12.4.3. This is a security update. Can you tell us, please, August, what it does and why we should get it?
Well, we should get it because Apple says so, I guess.
Well, that's why I should have a HomePod and, one of those modular Mac Pros that I can't get yet. I mean, there must be a better reason.
Well, to be honest, we really don't know exactly what it does. They haven't posted any security notes for this update, which they usually do, but they've kind of kept us in the dark on this. But if it's important enough for them to issue a release, it's probably important enough to install. So I would say go get it pronto.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, by the time people hear this, it's possible that'll be up. Because I know when some of the updates that came out earlier this week, I want to say as late as Tuesday afternoon, they still didn't have stuff. They still didn't have notes up for a lot of the security stuff, which we're going to get to the other, the sort of security fixes here in a bit. Going over the rest of the updates, though, macOS, watchOS, and tvOS also got updates, in addition to fun add-ons like the new emoji and support for Apple's new AirPods Pro. The macOS update also brings support for HomeKit Secure Video and HomeKit-enabled routers that we talked about a moment ago, as well as the ability to opt out of sharing Siri and dictation requests with Apple and deleting your history for Siri and dictation from Siri settings. The tvOS update also deals with the Siri changes. In fact, what you said a moment ago, how you'll be asked when you're installing the iOS update, I think it was, that happened with my tvOS update as well. And, like I said, there are additional security issues addressed as well, actual security fixes implemented here. I'm never sure if I'm counting them right, but a quick glance showed me at least 29 security fixes in the macOS Catalina update, 16 fixes in iOS and iPadOS 13.2, 12 fixes in watchOS 6.1, and 10 fixes for tvOS 13.2. Usually I ask you to pick something out, but I decided to this time. You know how books can be scary.
Oh, Stephen King books.
Well,
yeah.
Stephen King books, or apparently any books, frighten us, Mr. Trometer, with a scary book's vulnerability.
Well, Apple's notes say that parsing a maliciously crafted iBooks file may lead to disclosure of user information. And that sounds pretty bad. When you buy a book, Apple stores some of your information in the metadata, mostly your name and Apple email address. This helps prevent you from distributing the book all over the place, online and whatever. But this bug apparently can expose that personal information, which is no bueno.
But this takes care of that, assuming
Yes.
you're on your updates.
Exactly.
See, I only asked August to hit the book's vulnerability particularly, not because it seemed particularly dangerous, but to show how parts of the operating systems that we don't tend to think of as vulnerable can actually be trouble. It's not that this is worse than anything else. Like I said, it's just that, they're all bad and should all be patched, and they can be by keeping up with your updates. And of course, all of these updates are free, and each is available in the usual way. Apple has kicked 17 apps out of the App Store. 17! Do you realize, August, that leaves just like 2 million other apps for us to play with? Business Insider says the Cupertino company put the kibosh on the apps for violating Apple's Adware policies. The security company Wandera found that apps from India's App Aspect Technologies Private Limited were pulling some shady stuff in the background. According to the report, Wandera researchers found that the apps contained Trojan clicker malware, meaning that the apps could open links or web pages in the background and click them without the user's knowledge, which can artificially inflate traffic and generate ad revenue for the owner. Known as adware, it isn't necessarily as dangerous as other forms of malware, but it can drain a device's battery life. Now help me out here. If an app can do something in the background without my knowing it, how is that not dangerous? I mean, what keeps it from, stealing info or signing me up for stuff?
Well, there's a number of reasons you want an app to run in the background. A podcast app, for example, you might want to have already downloaded your podcasts. But the permissions it has only allows it to do certain things. For example, unless there's a bug, it can't grab all your contact information unless you've given it permission.
Okay, but what you're talking about is people being have, as my brother used to say when he was 8 years old. I mean, Wandera cited cases where people had been subscribed to expensive content services without, knowing it, following the installation of an infected app. I mean, with the apps that we're talking about in this story, Wandera says Android versions of these apps, not the iOS versions, but Android versions of these apps were gathering private information from a user's device. Now, the piece indicates that this was all thanks to a command and control server instructing these apps. I guess what I'm wondering is, on the iOS side, are there actual guardrails, like sandboxing and things like that keep developers from off-roading? Or are there just, signs and trust keeping developers on the road?
Well, sandboxing helps, but it doesn't cover everything. Apps can ask for certain permissions. Some of those are given by the user, such as whether or not to grant location or access to your photos, and some are given by the OS, such as just running in the background. In the first case, you, the user, are in control. In the second case, this is part of the app review process.
Now, I want to ask you about the app review process, actually, because that's one of the things that Apple addressed. To make sure that this stops, Business Insider had Apple saying that it's updated its security measures to prevent similar apps from making it into the App Store in the future. I know you're not inside Apple. I know you can't say for sure, but I mean, what sort of changes might they be making to make sure, this and things like it don't happen again?
Well, I suspect it has a lot to do with the review process. I say the more scrutiny, the better. I also know that Apple has made a tremendous amount of progress in automating the app review process. So this may be as simple as them updating their own internal review software to throw up red flags for certain permissions, which then cause them to dig in and see what these apps are doing.
Now, Wandera does have suggestions for businesses to follow when deploying apps. Some of their suggestions: an app security vetting process, including good reviews, legitimate developer profiles, and making sure that apps don't request unnecessary or high-risk app permissions like you were just talking about. For bring your own device settings, Wanderer recommends having a mobile security solution installed on mobile devices that can block command and control traffic and any outside connections, bad apps might try to make. Just so we're clear, when they say mobile security solution, I mean, they're talking about the regular antivirus software that we talk about, except for a mobile phone.
Correct.
Okay. Everything that they're talking about there is great for business. But what are we talking about, though, for the average John and Jane? I mean, people listening to this show, what kinds of things do they need to do to sort of guard against stuff like this?
Well, just be vigilant. First of all, don't grant permissions to an app that you're not comfortable with. If you're running a chess game app and they want access to your contacts, ask yourself why. And if you don't feel comfortable giving that permission, don't do it. Also, if you see files show up that shouldn't be there, if your phone is always running hot, if your credit card has strange charges, you should look deeper to find the problem, and it's probably on your phone and with some app that you've downloaded.
We're going to church in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Are you the go-to guy or gal for somebody else when it comes to Mac security? Family member or friend, maybe? Here's the thing. No matter who it's for, you can't be with them all the time, which means you can't keep them from downloading troublesome files or clicking on links they shouldn't click on. If they've got a Mac, then you've got support in the form of MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by Secure Mac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down the computer. Tell mom and dad, friends and other family. Let the Mac users in your life know about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. There's a free 30-day trial for everyone at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. 30-day trials are a safe click away at securemac.com/MacScan.
Make it an early Thanksgiving Day present.
Yeah, for yourself. Right? Do you really want to show up and can you listen? We're going to eat in 20 minutes, but can you take a look at my computer? No, I'm taking a look at the game. I'm taking a look at those yams. You should have gotten MacScan 3, like I said. That's it. Look, it's like I'm at your house right now for Thanksgiving, isn't it?
We're already fighting.
I know. Yeah. No. It's not me. It's you. I just need to go someplace else for Thanksgiving. Last story today. Look, everything doesn't need to be online. This is the edition for your eternal soul. The Next Web had word a week ago of a problem with the Rosary. I'm sorry, with the e-Rosary. They're not trying to get all, up in your religion. I'm not Catholic. I do know, I thought I knew what a rosary was. It turns out it means a bit more than I thought. I thought it was just the beads. For those who don't know, the dictionary on my computer says a rosary in the Roman Catholic Church is a form of devotion in which 5 or 15 decades of Hail Marys are repeated, each decade preceded by an Our Father and followed by a Glory Be. Colloquially, this is also the name for the string of beads for keeping count on a rosary, or keeping account of your rosary. So if they say, do 5, you count off the 5 beads. If they say 15, you count off the 15 beads. So there you go. It is. Oh, it's kind of funny, August. It's actually something you know and something you have. I'm not sure if that's familiar to people or not. Recently, according to the Next Web, the Vatican announced that it was getting into the Internet of Things with an e-rosary. Naturally, it didn't take long for somebody to find a major security flaw. According to the report, the Click to Pray e-rosary is a smart device that functions as a sort of Fitbit for prayer, And also just as a plain old Fitbit, kind of. It's activated when you make the sign of the cross and tracks your steps, calories, and locations. This was a thing that the Pope was apparently into and may still be. According to the Next Web, the app where the Pope apparently maintains a profile connects thousands of people around the globe to pray every day. The Click to Pray e-Rosary is also intended to accompany him in his daily and monthly intentions in order to build a world with a taste of the gospel. But the Vatican may not be the best place to go for app development. August, what went wrong?
Well, within 5 minutes, five minutes of looking into the e-Rosary application, Fidus Information Security, which is a company out of the UK, was able to completely take over an e-Rosary account, get the email, phone number, height, weight, and all kinds of other personal data for that account. 5 minutes.
Yeah. So what was actually the issue?
Well, there's an old saying that you should trust in God, but lock your car. And in this case, the security was just plain silly. I'm not quite sure who thought it was a good idea. Instead of a password, the Rosary service sends a PIN to the email people use to log in with, which in itself is just silly. Then the PIN code is transmitted with every single API transaction, meaning that every time you do your Hail Marys, the PIN is sent. And it's not encrypted. So anyone listening to your web traffic could grab that PIN and gain access to your account. Worse, the hacker could request a new PIN code, which would then boot out the actual account owner. Then the hacker would have total access to the account, including prayers, fitness steps, and a whole lot more.
Here's what I'm wondering. And was the decision to use a PIN honestly like to keep people from reusing passwords? And I'm not kidding with that. I mean, because why would you do that as opposed to telling people just use a strong password when you log in?
Probably because it worked for banks for a good 20 years while they had ATMs.
All right.
And it just doesn't work anymore. I'm thinking that the Pope's PIN is 00001.
Oh, stop. That's five. That's 5 numbers. It would only be 0000 is my guess. Look, I don't want to argue with the Pope. I mean, I really don't want to argue with the Pope. But seriously, some things just don't need to be web connected, do they?
Not everything needs an app. Come on, people.
All right. So here's the thing, though. They have these things at CVS. I'm not talking about the e-Rosary, but I mean, they have like a little dancing flower pot that, connects to stuff and the picture frames that connect to stuff. It's all gray label or gray box stuff, right? What is your general advice for anybody looking to buy any sort of web connected anything?
I think you should ask yourself whether or not the connected feature really helps you or is just cool. If it's just cool, then you probably don't need it.
Okay, what if it's really cool?
You still don't need it. If the only time you're ever going to use it is when friends come over and you go, hey, look, I've got an app and look what it can do, then you don't need it.
That's a great bit of advice. If its primary function is for you to be able to go, look how cool this is.
Exactly.
It may not be as cool as you think. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes for this show, for the last show we did, for all the shows we've ever done, and all the shows coming up once they become shows we've already done. securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. The address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.